Hi, I'm Mike Thompson. I've almost moved into my shed here. I've got a few other little projects, one of which is this workbench that I'm working on right now. So what I'm working on up here is a flip table. The purpose of this is to store a few of my tools so that they are more easily accessible. So what I'm going to do with this flip table is store at a minimum, I'm going to store my scroll saw, my grinder, and my chop saw on two different surfaces based on whether it's a metal tool or a wood tool. What I also hope to do is add my metal cutting bandsaw onto one of the sides. It's originally from Harbor Freight. Gosh, it's probably 10 years old by now. But the stand that it came with really is pretty flimsy. So I'd like to mount it to a really nice sturdy stand. And I'm hoping this will work for that as well. I should have enough room. All the face sheets will be OSB because I've got plenty of 7/16 OSB left over from the shed build. These little support ribs here will also be OSB, as will this bottom base. All the structural pieces will just be 2x4 pine. Now, one thing I'm doing differently than what's shown here in the drawing is I've changed these from standard butt joints to half lap joints, such that I don't need to counterbore a deep screw hole or use really long screws to hold it all together. That way it gives me a lot larger bearing capacity as well, since this board will actually be resting on these uprights here, rather than just be in shear here supported by these screws. So here I've got my four base pieces outlined. I've got two sheets of OSB here cut. One of these will simply lay flat on top of this, and that will form this bottom base right here. This other piece will be one of the faces of my table, and then I'll cut one more piece for the other side of the table. Okay, let's go do that. So apparently Alex and I are going to go run back and forth in the garage for a little bit, but I'll be back after that. Well, that was quite a run, but I'm back now. He's off to bed. I went ahead and marked this down 3 7/16 to then allow for a little bit of overshoot. And then we're going to cut this out on the bandsaw and make this half lap joint. Now here's a piece I've already cut. And what you want to do, obviously, is remove half the piece. So I went ahead and measured between my fence and my blade. And one good way to check to see if your blade actually is in the center of something is to cut it and then flip it over. And if it ends up in the same spot, well, then you got exactly down the center. Now, of course, bear in mind that if you cut exactly down the center, you will have overcut your slot for this case by half the thickness of the blade. Well, this blade is only a few thousandths of an inch thick, so half the thickness of that is negligible. So I went ahead and shot straight down the middle because it's really easy to calibrate by the flip test whether something's right in the middle or not. So now I'm going to go ahead and cut all of my longitudinal lap joint cuts, and then I'll follow up with all the cross cuts. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure these are square and put 2 screws in each corner. You can see here I've got my 2x4 support screwed down to my lower layer of OSB, and that is all pinching in this 1.5 inch, or I guess it's 1 inch EMT conduit that I'm using as my pivot bar. I started out by boring a 1 inch hole with my hole saw, 1 inch deep, because I didn't want the pipe to stick all the way through the legs. Then I used my Forstner bit to clear out the hole saw there. So you can see that it's about 1 inch deep and will accept my pipe. Once the pipe is inserted, I screw it all together. That way the legs of the table don't spread apart. So now I'm going to go ahead and join the bottom to my legs here. Okay, now I'm cutting the corner ribs for the legs. Now this piece is 8 1/4 inches wide. My saw doesn't quite have enough miter capacity to cut it in one pass, even though it's a 12 inch. So, to finish it up, what I do is flip it over and cut it from the other direction. And that works out okay. Now what I'm going to do is clamp my square here to this leg, and then I'm going to screw in the opposite rib. This will make sure that these legs stay upright while I attach them, because right now they're just a tad askew. You can see that by clamping the square to the leg, as I did the first one, this one here is perfect. Now, of course, this is made entirely from scrap wood. I bought way too much oriented strand board when I made the shed. Had quite a few 2x4s left over. So I could definitely think of some better, classier materials to build something like this with, but for what I'm using it for, this is going to be just fine. And now I'll do the two in the back. Okay, I've got all of my stiffening ribs screwed in. This sucker is really solid now. The last thing to do here is to drill the hole for the locking pins for this, because, well, I got the wheels out of my old pieces. I put carriage bolts, one in each corner from the side here. Since the carriage bolt has that little shoulder, that gives me something to grab onto so I can remove the bolt to spin the table. Now I'm going to go ahead, set my tools on it, and start to bolt them down. I finally got my flip table done. A few little minor adjustments here and there, but the operation's pretty simple. I was able to mount 3 of my tools on it. I elected not to mount the scroll saw so that I would have extra room just to do stuff with. I also don't really need the scroll saw anymore now that I have the bandsaw. So the scroll saw just sits on the bottom shelf down there, but it's simply held in place by these 4 carriage bolts in the corners. Then it's pretty well balanced. Simply just rotate it on around, put the pins back in, looks like I've got an audience. And now I can use this tool. So you can see, I can store 4 tools now in the floor space that this one tool used to take. I'm being summoned. But thanks for watching, I really appreciate it.